Welcome to episode 2 of You Dim Some, You Lose Some, Casa Minnesota's podcast to talk about whatever topics cross our mind, basically. Today we'll be talking about cultural appropriation, Asian Americans in media, and the new Disney live-action Mulan. We'll start with brief introductions, so everyone's name, pronouns, and position on board. I'm Abby. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I am advocacy chair.
I'll go next. I am David. I use he, him pronouns, and I am the secretary.
I'm Alexis. I use pronouns like she, her, hers, and I am the events coordinator on board.
I'm Amanda. I use she, her pronouns, and I am treasurer on board.
I'm Andrew. I use pronouns like he, him, his, and I'm process president.
All right, cool. Without further ado, let's just dive right into it. Our first topic is on cultural appropriation. And so, start off, I guess, the first question or discussion is just, what is your definition of cultural appropriation? Because I've kind of read into it in a lot of places, like both in person and on the internet, and I feel like it's a concept that's been quite bastardized a lot, it's kind of strawmanned a lot. People have different definitions of it. So let's just discuss what people think about it.
Well, I feel like the line between cultural appropriation and not is very thin. Like you said, David, the definition is very blurry. I feel like there's not a strict definition. Personally, I would say it's when someone wears or uses something from someone else's culture that they're not a part of, and doesn't necessarily understand the cultural meaning behind whatever they're doing from that culture. And they don't understand, or they're kind of using it as a gain of some sort, to better, I don't know, to better themselves or something.
Would you consider someone wearing whatever traditional clothing at an event that that's not their culture, but they're wearing it to pay respect to the event? Would that be appropriate or no?
I feel that's totally appropriate because they're going to the cultural holiday, I'm guessing, and wearing the traditional clothing. So they have a sense of the meaning of the culture and the tradition behind the clothing. So I would say that's fine.
Yeah, I would kind of agree with what Alexa said. I think it's fine as long as they know the history and significance behind it. And as long as they also recognize that it's not part of their culture, and they're paying homage to another culture by wearing it.
I think another big part of it for me is if you're drawing some sort of, I guess, gain from it that would otherwise be taking something away from a member of the culture that you are, I guess, appropriating. So if you're exploiting their culture for monetary gain or for fame, or if you're just in a position of power, and yeah, I guess again, sort of, I guess using the culture without really fully understanding it or being a part of it, I think that's kind of stepping over the line into cultural appropriation.
Sure. I would say I mostly agree, but it's kind of a hard thing to really define without actually looking at examples. So probably a pretty high profile controversy over what people considered cultural appropriation was, I think it was a few years ago, maybe it was more, I'm getting old, but when a girl went to prom in a T-Pow, white girl, and there's this whole blow up on Twitter. Some dude was my culture is not your prom dress, and then a bunch of people were you can do it, feel free to wear it, and there's a lot of controversy. And so do people think that that was an unacceptable form of cultural appropriation?
I personally thought it was, because she didn't really seem to understand the significance behind a Qipao. If you looked at some of the prom photos she took, there was one where they were all pretending to pray or worship something, and that seemed really strange to me. And they were doing the prayer hands in one of them, and there was just a lot of poses, and she in her defense, I think she said oh, it's just a really pretty dress I found at a vintage store. But I think that simplifies it too much. It's not just a pretty dress, it has a lot of significance to a lot of people. Yeah, and also her entire group was all white for the thing, and I don't know, they didn't seem to super get it.
I would agree with Abby on that. I don't think she understood the meaning behind the Qipao at all. And also, if I remember correctly, the one that she wore was really tight fitting. So that kind of like pays into like the fetishization, I can't say the word, of kind of like Asian women and like the cheap house in general, like being super tight fitting. But yeah, I would agree with Abby.
Okay, I'm just gonna push you a little bit further on this for the sake of discussion. So like a lot of people, when they kind of criticize this idea of cultural appropriation, like of being like a problematic thing, and they kind of associate it with other things they consider problematic, like cancel culture. So like explain what exactly is the harm of, like, for example, wearing a teepaw without knowing the culture and history behind it. Like, how does that damage one's culture or the Chinese culture?
I think it simplifies it to the point where like anyone can have like cultural or historically significant items without recognizing the importance, and that culture is really just like how you appear as a person. It isn't tied to anything, which I would disagree. Like I think food can be culture, like clothing can be culture, and when you like negate those things as being part of something's culture, I think it's just like you only identify, you know, how someone looks and like their race as part of culture.
I would like definitely agree with that, Abby. And also, as like Asian Americans, a lot of times in our lives, we've been ridiculed for like the things we wear or the things we eat. So when someone of another culture is able to do that and is accepted easily, um, it's kind of just like minimizing all of the, I don't know, self-hatred and self-hatred of our culture that we felt growing up as Asian Americans.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. I haven't really like contributed so far because I've been doing the question asking, but yeah, I agree. I think that like if you kind of just like what's take what you think is cool without like actually respecting the person or the group that you're taking it from, you're kind of just like exploiting them for your own benefit. Insofar as most like groups that get appropriated from are historically oppressed and or colonized. And so if you just like take their culture, you're like taking from them, but you're not actually doing anything to help them or repay what repay for past wrongs. Not necessarily saying that like not necessarily saying that like you owe them anything, something like things in the past, but you should still be what aware of what happened instead of just like brushing it to the side and only using their culture.
Yeah, I mean, along like the same lines, I guess that person has to realize their privilege in being able to like wear someone else's like culture.
On this same example, like I guess like you really don't see very many like white girls going to prom in T-pose at all. But like, do you think there is a case in which a white girl could wear a T-pose to a prom or like some formal event without some like outcry breaking out on Twitter and people being like, yeah, that's okay, that's acceptable?
That's kind of difficult to answer because I feel like prom isn't uh, an event that you should be wearing like a cheap how or someone else's like cultural fashion to, because it's an Americanized celebration. So I don't know how to answer that. That's really difficult.
Yeah, I mean
But
it's a pretty tough subject, you
I
know.
feel like no matter what, any like person that isn't like a part of someone's culture that like wears their traditional fashion, like it's gonna create an upstir, like no matter like who it is, like where it is or who it is. But it really depends on, I guess, the context. I mean, I feel like I wouldn't accept a white girl wearing a cheapao to prom ever, because I don't think prom should be where you should be wearing one as like a white person. But that's just my opinion.
And then like to compare, if it was like a white girl wearing a qipao to like a Chinese New Year celebration.
Like yeah, that's fine, because like you would traditionally wear a qipao to Chinese New Year, and like they obviously understand the meaning behind Chinese New Year. So
And like in that context, I wouldn't say you were wearing it to like chase any like clout or anything, or like just to, because like you don't stand out in that point. Like yeah.
I would agree with that. Like, I don't think I could like be okay with a white person wearing a qipao to prom ever. I guess the only context I can think outside of like like Chinese New Year or like some Chinese celebration would be like a wedding, maybe. Like if you are a white person marrying someone of like Chinese descent, like I think that is okay, and you want to have like a traditional Chinese wedding, like I think that's 100% okay.
Agreed.
Cool. So that's on clothing. We can quickly touch on like other forms of cultural appropriation. Because I think clothing is like the most high profile one that people talk about, just like cosmetic stuff. You'll see like, I don't know, white people wearing dreads, which is another form of supposed appropriation, as another cosmetic example. But there's like other culture that can be taken. And so I wanted to do the discussion a little bit towards things like food and cuisine. What do people think about kind of taking recipes from other cultures and making them yourself when you're not part of that culture?
I absolutely hate when white chefs like take Asian food and then I guess like create super expensive bougie restaurants and then only cater towards more rich white people. And then like sell themselves as like authentic Asian food. I feel like I see that a lot in like big cities like Chicago, and like New York City, here in Minneapolis. But like I absolutely despise when that happens. But yeah, I feel like that's just like another hard definition. Uh, I guess like defining the authenticity of Asian food. Because I don't know, like how do you define authenticity?
Um, I mean, as far as like authenticity goes, I feel like there's like a long historical tradition of certain foods being made only in a certain part of the world, and recipes being exchanged only has been happening a long time. Like obviously you had like the Silk Road way back into, but it's been accelerating a lot with globalization and like colonialism. But yeah, so I think it's not like super hard to define general authenticity right now, although like I think a lot of fusion places are blurring the line. But I sorry, were you gonna say something?
Oh, I was just thinking like Chinese American restaurants. I guess it's hard to define those as authentic due to like the history of just Chinese food in general in America having to kind of adapt to American tastes. So like yeah, that's just what I was thinking about authenticity.
Fair enough. But yeah, I don't know. I started talking. I actually wanted to bring like your point back and connect it with what Andrew said when it came to appropriation. Like unlike cosmetics, where the harm might be a little bit more tangible by trivializing another culture, I think a little bit more intangible by trivializing another culture. Like restaurants and cuisine, I think you can actually see a tangible impact because when the white chef like makes their restaurant, that actively takes away from authentic like Asian American chefs trying to make a living. Often like because they are a white chef, that can give them a louder platform or more visibility, even though the food is not necessarily as good.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And then like this is kind of something I've like struggled with because like being vegan, like I feel like when I try and adapt recipes, like I feel some sort of guilt and I don't really know why. Like I can't pinpoint it, but I'm just like I feel weird making this with like impossible meat instead of like beef or something. So it's just like I kind of avoid cooking like traditional food because of that, because I'm just like I can't eat this, so I might as well just not. Which is like a big reason why I've never had a mooncake. Sad. But yeah, because I was thinking of like trying to make my own, but I was like, I don't know. My biggest thing is that I personally think that like what David said, like a white chef like shouldn't be able to have like the platform and get like the prestige off of like Asian cooking or Asian food. And I think when I was trying to learn a lot of like more traditional recipes, my parents like sent me these videos and they were all like by white people and like my parents are white and I tried to point that out to them, but they're like, oh, it's fine. I'm like, no.
Yeah, that's where you get like the funny internet memes, like Uncle Roger reacting to fried rice or whatever, right? But yeah, I feel like you should be allowed to make you should be allowed to like substitute vegan food. Like that's not even close to anywhere like appropriation or anything. So go
Yeah.
for it, Abby. Like shoot your shot. Be a traditional chef.
Yeah. I don't know. It's hard, but like mainstream vegan movement is so white, and it really bothers me. But I don't know. I have to deal with that.
I mean, I don't know. Like on a personal level, I'm personally okay with like anyone making any food if they're just making it for themselves, right? Like if you're like white and you want to try like kung pao chicken, you like Google the recipe and you make it. Like I don't really consider that cultural appropriation. Because like I consider that like you just think it tastes good and you want to eat some freaking kung pao chicken. But where the appropriation comes in is where like you are more exploiting the culture like to their detriment.
Mhm.
Which doesn't really happen when you do anything on a personal level, unless like I guess you go to your friends and you're like, if you my kung pao chicken, it's like way better than that Chinese restaurant. I don't fucking know. Yeah, like on a personal level, I think you're good, Abby. I think most people are good.
It
Yeah.
reminds me of when, like, I guess like white people, they don't really like to go to authentic Asian restaurants because usually they're dirty or the waiters are like super loud and not very nice. Um, so like they prefer to go to like the whitewash like Asian restaurants instead where they're treated nice and it's clean. But yeah, that just reminded me of that whole ish.
I feel like there's like a certain aesthetic where it's gonna be like a gas Asian restaurant. You just like
Literally.
get a starter pack in there. With
When
the,
their menu is like 50 pages long.
yeah, literally. Like you have like the cat waving in the window.
Yeah, actually, so talking about Uncle Roger now, so I mean, obviously, like if someone who is not Asian pulls like an Asian accent, that shit doesn't fly, right? But like, how do you? So Uncle Roger is actually a character created by some comedian. I don't know who it is, but so he doesn't actually talk like that, right? And I guess this kind of is related to our next topic in a little bit of a way, but like, how do we all feel about Uncle Roger pulling like an Asian accent? Because maybe it's like funny to us, right? Because um, I don't know, like I mean, as Asians, like we have like felt self-conscious maybe about accents or family members having accents, excuse me. And I think like if our audience or if Uncle Roger's audience was specifically Asians um, or Asian Americans, like I feel like I'd feel a little bit less weird about it, but like just like having his greater like audience be like white people too, and just like people in general, like I don't know. I guess like to me, I feel like that I don't know. It doesn't feel right to me. I feel like that's about as far as I've gone with that thought. But
Yeah, I kind of agree. Like, I kind of just like mentioned Uncle Roger's one-off because they're just making fun of some fried rice recipe that was like washing the rice or whatever. But yeah, I honestly like maybe it's just because I'm self-conscious, but I've always like felt a little bit weird seeing like an Asian accent being played out for like comedic effect. I know that like accents are surely something that does get played out for comedic effect because like obviously like people use accents all the time. People consider it funny, but I've just personally felt kind of weird. I'd have to like think about why I found it weird, but I've always like found it a little bit weird.
I feel like it's especially weird when it's like the token Asian in a TV show or movie that has an Asian accent, because obviously they're using it to differentiate that character. Um, but this like whole conversation reminded me of Fresh Off the Boat, and I remember Constance Wu had to address like her using an accent in the TV show when she's actually doesn't have an accent. And like she worded it, like her answer was that she's trying to normalize that the Asian accent within, I guess, America and show that I guess it's not weird to have an Asian accent or it shouldn't be just for like comedic purposes. It's also to inform like America about what Asian families actually look like in America. So yeah.
I do like that take. Like I feel like part of my weirdness about Asian accents is kind of just born out of a general desire to like fit in with society. It goes along with things just like language, being self-conscious of your own language and stuff like that, where I used to, I mean, I still don't really speak Chinese, but that's because my Chinese got worse. But usually, I used to like not really like to speak Chinese, like on the phone with my parents or whatever, or in public, just because it would like make you stand out, right? And I feel like as a kid, I didn't want my parents to like volunteer at school stuff because I didn't want their accent to like be embarrassing or whatever. And so a lot of that weirdness about the Asian accent is just like because when you're a kid, you just want to fit in and just be quote unquote normal instead of being special or being standing out or being weird. And so I do think like normalizing the accent is a good thing. I just don't know like how far it goes, if that's like an excuse or if that's actually true. And also I don't to Andrew's point, like when someone like Uncle Roger does it, it's definitely not to normalize the accent. It's definitely for comedic effect. We kind of got off track there, but so we'll swing it back around to cultural appropriation unless anyone else has some last minute comments on the accent. Maybe we can like bring it back to the accent later on, but for now, like one topic that I do think is pretty important on cultural appropriation that I want to cover is just the difference in the response from Chinese nationals that live in China and Chinese Americans. Because a lot of times when something gets accused of like being cultural appropriation, like Asian Americans will say that it's cultural appropriation, while the native Asian people, like people who live in Asia, will think it's like cute and be like, wow, look at them, they're wearing our thing. Very cool. So why do people think that there's this difference, and what do they think the significance is? What do you think the significance is?
I think it's because Chinese nationals never had to like try to fit into a different like the American society. So like as Asian Americans, we'd be self-conscious about like wearing our traditional wear out or even like bringing our home cooked meals to school to eat for lunch. But Chinese nationals, they don't have to deal with that because like it's their culture, it's their whole society, and everyone like knows like wears the chi pao or like knows of like all the traditional dishes that are brought to school. So I think when they see it, when they see white people wearing it, they think it's cute and like cultural appreciation. But when Asian Americans see it, we see it as like, but when I do that, you don't respond the same way.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think in general, like in Asia, there's a bit of an obsession with like Western culture. So I think they think it's like very cool that like white people or like people from the West like think like Chinese culture is cool or whatever. But they also like haven't had to deal with like maybe being made fun of for trying to embrace Chinese culture. Because like yeah, and it's kind of reminded me yesterday, like when we were filming Moonfest, like I had to wear my T-Pow and I actually didn't film it in my apartment because like our apartment is small and my roommates are loud. So I went to like a room like in my apartment and like people just stared at me and I was like, this is fine, but like you can't help but feel like slightly self-conscious about like just wearing a T-Pow around like a couple floors of your apartment. So I just think it's like those things, like you don't have to deal with that if you are a Chinese national versus like Asian American.
Yeah, I didn't really think of like the Chinese people liking like kind of being obsessed with Western culture thing, but that is kind of true. Just 'cause, like Western culture is so dominant, right? Like professional attire in Chinese culture, in like all over the world is Western business attire, for example. And so it's kind of like maybe it's seeing it as like a way for, I don't know what I'm saying, but yeah, like you said, they think it's cute that Chinese people might think it's cute that Americans like their culture more than their own. But yes, I do agree. So then a lot of people, I feel like on the internet, like when I'm browsing Reddit or whatever, a lot of people will be, like use it as a gotcha where someone who's like natively Chinese or whatever is like, yeah, I give you permission to wear this dress, like, and they're like, oh, boom, you got permission from this one person. It's clearly not cultural appropriation. So then, like, the vibe clearly is that Like just because one person says it and they don't understand the Chinese American experience, the Asian American experience, does not just completely validate cultural appropriation, right?
I definitely agree, and I think when like a good crowd of people are like, "Oh, you're validated by this one Chinese national saying this," I think it's like equates like the Asian American experience with like a Chinese national experience, and like their opinion should be the same when it isn't. And I think it kind of like erases the long history of like Asian Americans in general by saying like this is fine.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a strong distinction between the Asian American experience and the Asian, like, living in Asia experience. So finally, to cap off the cultural appropriation topic, just real quick, like I do think like cultural exchange is a good thing and can be a beneficial thing. So on that note, what do people think is the correct way to engage with other cultures? Like if you think there's something in another culture that you think is cool and you want it, how do you go express that?
I think like the first step is to like educate yourself about that culture. And I know like the term like educating yourself like does come from like a bit of a place of privilege, and it's also like a little annoying because you always hear it. Because I know that not everyone like has necessarily the time or resources to truly like educate themselves about something. But I think if you are taking or trying to like take the effort to appreciate a culture in a certain way, you should learn like the history behind it. And I think like a important thing is like you should try and learn it, whether that's reading like a book or listening to a podcast like this podcast, or anything else. Like you should make sure you're learning from like someone of the community and not just like this other white person who wrote an article or something.
Um, I agree with that. And also, like, a good way is maybe asking a friend from that culture, but also keep in mind that you shouldn't use them as your source of all information because that can be kind of annoying to that person. But yeah, like, a good way is like asking a friend.
Yeah, I don't know. My take, I think I'm probably like a little bit less cancel-y on cultural appropriation than um, other people. I do think it's a thing, but like I think cultural exchange can be a good thing if done correctly. It is a good thing if done correctly. But with that in mind, we already kind of touched on this, but we'll just segue cleanly into our next topic, which is the portrayal of Asians and Asian Americans in media. And so this is a very broad topic. Let's just talk about it. The general question that we can use to open it up is like, what do you think is the position of Asian Americans in the current media landscape? Do you think they're fetishized? Like, how do you feel about the representation, etc.?
I mean, I think when we were growing up and like in the past, if Asians were ever shown in media, it would be like the cute, goofy sidekick or whatever, kind of like that character where it's like more comedic relief than anything else. Like they don't have a story arc, they don't really have character development or anything like of real significance other than maybe like a couple memorable scenes, but most of them are going to be like based on self-deprecating humor, if anything else. I honestly don't pay a ton of attention to current media. Like I don't know anything about current music or movies or TV shows, so I don't think I have the best opinion on like really current media.
Yeah, I think it's like pretty undeniable that there's a lot of like stereotypes for Asian Americans in media. Like back in the day, like there's very overt stereotypes. Disney is like a good example in a lot of the old movies, like Siamese cats and whatnot, and just all that stuff. But the question I was going to ask, which maybe you can't answer because you said you don't pay attention to media, is do you think, like, how much do you think it has improved since then, like the portrayal of Asian Americans in media in the current day?
I guess like based on what I know, I think it has improved, but I think it's still like something that's very like out of the norm when we see the improvement. Like for movies, I guess like Crazy Rich Asians or The Farewell, like a lot of people still think that's like wow, like for once it's an Asian person not being depicted as like as the main character and with a cool story arc. And like I think in our community we all think that and think it's very noteworthy, but I know like when I listened to an interview with Aquafina, she was talking about how like a lot of other people thought that The Farewell was like a Chinese made movie, but it's actually American. And a lot of the reason for that is that there's like a lot of Chinese that's used throughout. And I actually talked to one of my white friends from high school, and then he was like, "Oh, you haven't seen it? I heard it's like a really good Chinese movie." I'm like, "Well, it's an American movie." He's like, "But they use Chinese." I was like, "Well, yeah, but like it's an American movie." So I don't know if it's improving, honestly. Like I feel like it is. Like I think in our community we generally think it is, but I don't know if it is on a broader scale.
Yeah, I was like also gonna mention Crazy Rich Asians. I feel like there's definitely small steps forward, but they're not big steps at all. Like with Crazy Rich Asians, they're portraying super rich um, Asians that are in Singapore, like super unrealistic, and something that would kind of cater towards American audiences as well. And also like The Farewell. I like it was like huge in our community for sure, but not, I would say, like in the rest of like the American community. And then there was also Parasite that won Best Picture, I think last year for the Oscars, and that was pretty huge because that was the first time a foreign film won Best Picture. And like there's a ton of like backlash from like people who were like, oh, I don't want to read subtitles. Like, why did this film win the Oscar? So there's definitely still not a huge acceptance of Asians in media, but you know, there's tiny steps.
Or some people were like, I'll wait for the remake of it with this white actor.
God, I hate that
to watch it.
Okay, I actually hate that so much. They also remade Snowpiercer, which is another Bong Joon-ho, that's the director's film. They also remade that into like an American TV show, which is like so unnecessary. Yeah, it's like an HBO TV series now, and it's just so annoying. Like, why is that necessary?
The original already starred like Chris Evans, so it's not like the original was extremely Asian, anyways. But,
yeah, I'm just saying like it didn't get as much hype when he was the director, just the director, but now since it's on HBO, like an American streaming television, like people like it more.
Honestly, I haven't even heard about like TV the TV remake, but I do actually think that Snowpiercer got like a lot of hype, at least like in the film community. It got a lot of critical acclaim. It's not like it's not a blockbuster movie by any means, but as far as like indie movies go, I think it did get the respect it deserves. But it also did have Chris Evans as the star, so I don't know what that really says.
That's true.
Not
I guess like
go ahead.
I was gonna touch on like the music aspect of media. You have like artists like from 88 Rising, like Rich Brian and Joji, which are, it's like I think they're artists from like all around Asia and also like America, that are gaining popularity like not only in the Asian community. So yeah, that's like I guess a step in like the music industry. And it's also, I'm pretty sure, like a totally Asian run music label. So that's pretty cool too.
Yeah, I definitely think like culture is generally trending in the right direction. I was really happy about Parasite's win. And I think there's like some good Asian American films coming out. There always has been really, but they've been getting more publicity. I watched the trailer for this movie called Minari this morning, which is like a Korean American movie made by A24, which is the Moonlight, Farewell, whatever, indie studio. It looks pretty gas. Also, just a fun fact. But I don't know. I feel like indie films have always like people who make indie films are always more progressive anyways, and generally like there's a lot more freedom. So the representation has kind of been there. Like people are more willing to make stories there now. But I agree that like when it comes to like actual major reaching like big quantities of people, like large crowds, the masses, there's still like a limit there. Other than Parasite, like the last big Asian like media thing was pretty much Crazy Rich Asians, which was like a few years ago.
Yeah, and then I guess like I always think that movies and TV shows are gonna lag behind music because I think music, especially with like like there are gatekeepers in music for sure, but I think with like the popularity of Spotify and like other platforms where you can release things without those barriers that exist in like TV and movies, like I think it can like be distributed more broadly and gain popularity sooner. And then I also think like with music, like this might be like a bad thing, but I think like because you don't have like a face associated with it necessarily, like when you hear something on the radio, most of the time, like you don't know if the artist is like Asian or not. I think it's also easier for people to like it and then recognize later that it's like produced by someone who's Asian and then realize the like more not validity, but like appreciate it like as an afterthought more than like as a like they're seeking out like an Asian made thing.
Are there even like Asian pop stars that get played on the radio? I feel like there aren't really.
I would say like Rich Brian or Joji from 88 Rising.
I
Not
feel like
that
they don't get
many.
like radio exposure though. Like they're not really pop. They're more. They're
Yeah, I feel like Joji would more likely than Rich Brian because like Rich Brian is mostly hip hop and rap, which they don't really put on the radio, mainstream radio that much.
I mean, I don't know. I don't even know if people really listen to radio anymore. I guess like more relevant would be like if you listen to it on a Spotify made playlist, like then you might not necessarily know.
Does anyone else have any thoughts about the general like fetishization of Asians in media? It's because that's like another subtopic of Asians in media that probably merits some discussion.
Um, I guess like another common character, what would you call it? I
Trope,
don't know.
stereotype.
Yeah, trope. For like Asian woman is like the small, submissive, nerdy girl. Like right now, I'm thinking of Scott Pilgrim saves the world. What's her name? I
Ramona?
forgot.
No, not Ramona.
No,
Knives
the
Chow.
Asian girl. Yeah.
Knives
She's
Chow,
like
right?
yeah. Um, she's like the stereotypical mousy little Asian girl who's submissive, and is nerdy and all that. So like that's another trope that I see a lot.
I don't know. Maybe I should not. I don't know. Trope. The tropes like is a whole new discussion, and that's a very wide discussion if you want to talk about the history of Asian American stereotypes. I do think that media is moving in a positive direction, but perhaps not fast enough. That's pretty much my take. Is anyone else? I'm willing to like close on that thought unless anyone else has any thoughts. Cool, cool. And so like another big topic in Asian Americans in media is probably like large corporations trying to access China as a movie market. Because like there's so many people in China, this could be lucrative business if you got big exposure there. Like I don't know, Marvel movies usually make a ton of bank in the Chinese market. So they try to like appeal to the Chinese market, like the native Chinese market. You can tell where I'm going with this. Like obviously Disney making Mulan, like hired, casted Liu Yifei as the main Chinese actress, etc. So that's definitely a thing, but I guess does anyone have any thoughts about that? Like just trying to capture the Chinese market.
Yeah, I think it's like really sad how to capture the Chinese market they try and use like more like Chinese nationals or like people who live in China like actors instead of like Chinese Americans. I can't really remember because it was a while ago when I watched it at least, but I think there's only like one, maybe two Chinese Americans in the film, and most of it was like actors who I would say like most people in like the US would not recognize by name, but everyone in China would. So, I mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't have any, like, I think you can have like a diverse casting pool in terms of like nationality or citizenship or whatever. But it's just, I think it was very like focusing just on like Chinese nationals.
Right. Like by doing so, you kind of erase the like once again you're erasing the Asian American experience and kind of treating it as the same as like the Asian experience.
Yeah, and I think you also like, I think it's Disney failed to recognize how important that film was for so many Asian Americans. Like for I think a lot of people, like it was the first time that they've really seen like I guess it's a cartoon, but like like a story that they're familiar with or a story they grew up with, like being displayed on a wide scale level, and like someone who at least is like drawn like them like being displayed and like having a character arc and everything. I think there's like, I guess just like a lot of people, it was like the first time that they really felt proud of like something in the mass culture. But when you like don't cast any Asian Americans for the like live action remake or whatever, I think like aren't recognizing like how important it was to not just Chinese people or whatever.
Yeah, that's fair. At the same time, yeah, I mean that's just like Disney being Disney. Like Disney is fundamentally for profit. That's why I mentioned like indie studios are a lot better at doing representation and that kind of thing. Disney's just gonna like hire whatever face they think is gonna rake in the cash, unfortunately. But yeah, so that's something some of the like studios have been trying to do recently though. Like just off the top of my head, like Pacific Rim Uprising definitely got like paid, definitely like spent a ton to try to capture the Chinese market. Like they said there's a few scenes in like Hong Kong or whatever, and there's just a ton of like, I don't want to say like Chinese propaganda, but like Chinese nationalism in it. So yeah, like there's like this interesting uh, not conflict of interest, but like confluence of interest between studios trying to make money and the Chinese market. But unless anyone has anything else on that, we can like actually formally segue into Mulan now.
I was actually gonna add that like in the Washington Post analysis, I like read about the film to refresh myself before the episode. Like they mentioned how in the end credits they thanked like a government entity in I'm blanking on the province, but like the province
Xinjiang?
where like the Uyghur persecution is happening, and how like they think a lot of that like appealed to more like Chinese nationals. And I think like I don't know if they specifically, if Disney was specifically like vindictive and be like, we're gonna do this to like f over like everyone who wants democracy or whatever, but just in general, like I think like it shows that they obviously value like having a Chinese market more than Asian Americans or anything like that.
Yeah, that was like a controversy that I was going to cover later on, but we can actually just like cover the more meta stuff at the beginning, and then we can talk about the action movie afterwards. But yeah, like people like definitely got super mad about that on the internet. Um, and I don't know. The funny thing is that like Chinese people didn't even like the movie that much. Apparently, I've been like reading analysis of how Mulan did in the Chinese market, and they just did not, just didn't like the movie that much. They thought it was like poorly done, and so I guess like just still trying to figure out the formula to try to make money there. And this one did not work super well. But another like controversy associated with the movie is the lead actress Liu Yifei, and that one time that she reposted like a pro Hong Kong police thing on her social media, and that got a ton of backlash also. And so I just wanted to see what y'all thought about the backlash and like the boycott Mulan, all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, like she is a Chinese citizen, so as much as I like don't agree with her comment, I think she probably felt a lot of pressure to comment on the situation, and I guess I see why she commented the way she did, because her fan base is in China like primarily. Like I definitely do not agree with what she said in like any way, but I at the same time think that like she probably as a person couldn't have stayed quiet about the situation. I don't know if she needed to like blast it like on Twitter or whatever. I think that's what she did, but I think there's like maybe a less like controversial place to put your opinion out there. But I understand like maybe why she felt pressure to say something, and I don't know if it is like her genuine opinion, because the Chinese government is scary, and I see why she probably felt pressure to say that.
All right. I think there's like a very delicate balance with how China is perceived in the U.S. right now. Like China's kind of being made into like a very easy scapegoat for a lot of American citizens, and it kind of comes to a point where anytime you talk about China, like you have to condemn the Chinese government like very unequivocally to make it seem like you're not like some Chinese bot or something, or else you get accused of being like a Chinese shill, especially when I'm like browsing sites like Reddit. Um, and like obviously I'm kind of doing it, but like I think the Chinese government's like Chinese government is scary and their actions merit discussion. But at the same time, like there's a lot of like just general focus on only China and nothing else, mostly just because it's like a really easy target to attack. I think it's like it's outside something that's close, and so they're kind of foreign, they're other to you. And so like the whole question of boycott Mulan is just like targeted at China. But the point is that like it's also Disney that actively makes the decision to try to appeal to China, and Disney that like makes all these poor profit decisions, and Disney's like not a good company at all. And you don't see people saying like boycott Disney very often. Like you see people just consuming the shit out of a bunch of Disney material, and even though Disney's not a good company either. And so like I think a lot of the boycott Mulan like anxiety and tirade over the internet is driven by a lot of anti-Chinese sentiment, just China in general, which makes me a little bit uncomfortable just because I don't know, a lot of times it like boils over into not just targeting the Chinese government, but just Chinese and Chinese American people in general. That's just my take. I don't know. I haven't. It's kind of a thing that I have to like think about a lot if I wanted to like make a coherent perspective on it. And so I'm probably rambling a lot right now.
I mean, I definitely agree that like it shouldn't just be like boycott Mulan. Like it should have been more like boycott Disney, because it's like this was kind of the I guess dilemma I ran into when I was like, should I watch Mulan? Well, one, I didn't have Disney Plus, so like it wasn't really an actual question. But I was like, okay, well, one, I don't want to spend $30 plus $10 to get Disney Plus and to watch the movie. Like I was angry that was like extra money, but then I was like, I should support this film because like if this film doesn't do well, Disney will probably use it as an excuse to like not showcase Asian stories at all. But then I obviously didn't agree with like the actress's opinions, and like in general I thought the live action movie wasn't going to be what I had kind of hoped for out of like a remake of Mulan. But I don't know, I think like overall, like maybe I think that argument that I think a lot of people are having internally is like not the correct one to be having. Like it should be more like, why do I probably give like hundreds of thousands of dollars to like Disney? Maybe not hundreds of thousands. Maybe if you go to the park like really regularly, but like why do I give several hundred of dollars to Disney like a year when obviously this company isn't really benefiting anyone?
Yeah, I'm just gonna bring it back to what you said about like the general pressure from the Chinese government. Like pretty much everyone that resides in East Asia that has like a public figure and wants to maintain their public figure is pro Chinese government, pro Beijing. Like you'll see people who will speak out against Beijing that are public figures, but they rapidly cease to become public figures. So like unless you want to like maintain your status, you pretty much have to be at least outwardly pro Beijing. Like a lot of people don't think about the fact that like I don't know. I feel like Jackie Chan has posted like pro Beijing stuff before. Donnie Yen has posted pro Beijing stuff before, and those are all like stars that are highly hyped up in the West as well in America. And so it's if Disney and if film studios in general want to keep expanding into China, this is definitely not the last of like the controversies around Hong Kong that we're going to see in the cinema space in the film world. It's definitely going to happen more in the future, and that's just something to think about. I'm not necessarily saying that your options are either just like cut out the Chinese market completely or deal with it. And I guess people can speak with their wallets on that then. Like if the boycott is sufficiently successful, then maybe Disney will cut out the Chinese market, but I doubt it. So it will probably continue. So with that in mind, we can brush aside all the shadows of the controversy that have been plaguing Mulan and actually discuss the film itself. So what did y'all think about the actual movie, disregarding everything else?
The actual movie, I thought it was just like meh. Like I wouldn't watch it again because I was like, oh, I should rewatch it before this so I can form real opinions. And I was like, that's like 3 hours I won't pay attention to anything. I just don't think the actual movie was that great. Like I think maybe I had like maybe in general there's too high of expectations because there's always a ton of hype around Disney films, especially this one having been postponed for so long. I think the like general hype kind of built up. And I think during like COVID especially, like we all hope for something to like get our minds off of the general dire state of the world. But I don't know, I just think it was boring, honestly.
Yeah, I kind of agree. Andrew, what do you think?
I don't know. I'm not a big movie guy in general.
Okay.
No, I was gonna say, I don't know. Like, I just like watch things. To me, it wasn't like unenjoyable, but yeah, I mean, like, there were a couple parts where I was like, oh, that's really cool. Like that first time, like, who is it? Freddie Wong's brother. Who is that? Jimmy Wong showed up on screen. I just like freaked out. That was really cool. I guess that was like an instance of like actual Asian American representation in the film. And then, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of like a movie. I mean, I don't really have anything else to say. Just kind of.
Yeah, I thought that was whack, by the way. Like, I'm not even making like a political or socio-political commentary point, but like Jimmy Wong is like clearly Asian American. They just like made him do like an Asian accent because everyone else, like all the native Chinese actors, are doing an Asian accent. So it just like felt really cognitively dissonant almost to see this guy who I've seen in skits speak like perfect English doing an Asian accent. Like that's not. There's no point that I'm making. Just an observation. But anyways. I think it's okay though. Like you're not like a big movie critic. Like obviously it matters what your average movie watcher thinks about movies also, right? I agree with Abby though. I thought it was like a pretty mediocre movie. Like I guess I could have thought of like worse ways to spend my 2 hours, but it was yeah, I mean I waste 2 hours all the time, so I could definitely have thought of worse ways to spend my 2 hours. But yeah, it was like just pretty meh.
Note from the editor, spoilers for Mulan ahead.
Any specific aspects that you didn't really like, Abby?
I thought it was really long, to be honest. I don't know if I was just expecting like the cartoon length of 90 minutes to extend into the live action, but I felt like the battle scenes were super long. I was just like, I don't know. I kind of liked the new character, but then I was like, no, I don't know.
Like the dude love interest, or
No, not the dude love interest. I like the like woman person.
the witch lady?
The witch lady, yeah. She was like cool, but like I didn't think she was that cool, but then I was like, I think she was my favorite character. That's sad. I don't know, I think it was too long. I think it was like really drawn out. I don't know. I don't think anything really happened in the movie, honestly.
That's really interesting because I almost like thought it was mediocre for the exact opposite reason. Like it felt really I'm not gonna say fast because like it's not like the movie just blazed past because I wasn't like super engrossed in it, but it felt like fast paced for a 2 hour movie. Like if you make a 2 hour movie, I feel like you're allocating significant amount of time to like do stuff, and it still felt like every scene was like not given enough time to really develop into anything. Like it was just here's this plot point, here's the next plot point, here's the next plot point, here's the next scene. So that's my take on the pacing actually. But yeah, I guess we differ. Andrew, tiebreak us.
I remember before this recording at a different time, I think you had said that this movie felt like it was doing too much. And like the few times it did like try to reference the original Mulan, I just remember thinking this is very out of place. And I think the appeal, like Disney was trying to appeal to people who watched the original Mulan, and they're like, oh, like they put some like orchestral scores in there, but they played the same song like over and over. And to me that was way out of place. And like the few times, like I mean maybe it is a family movie, but I feel like the few times the Phoenix showed up, it was just like it just felt very I guess like blunt as a tool, as like a movie or a cinematic tool. Actually, so I guess that's I don't know. I don't really know where I'm going with this.
No, I definitely agree. Like it was so heavy-handed. Like they supposedly like the Phoenix was supposed to be a bit of a replacement for Mushu. Like they did two totally different things, but like I just didn't get the point of the Phoenix. Like I read this review, I've read some reviews that are like, yeah, the Phoenix was gorgeous and the shots with it in it were like really beautiful. And I was like, I couldn't like focus on the beauty of the shots. I was just like, why the frick is this thing showing up again? Like, what is this thing doing in my scene? Like the scene at the end, like um, this is like almost a recurring thing because you saw it happen in Game of Thrones also with like the dragon wings spreading out behind a person to make it look like they're like an angel or taking flight. Like when the Phoenix is like flying directly behind Mulan, like I'm not gonna say like cringe, but it was just so weirdly cliche. I could not like almost ruined my immersion. But maybe I'm like too cynical.
I think like okay, maybe I thought it was too long because I kind of zoned out like halfway through. Like once they introduced that like dude character, I was like, oh, never mind, this movie sucks. And I just like really did not like his character, even though he didn't do anything.
Like the
So
villain or the love interest?
the like the new love interest or
Oh,
whatever that like didn't do anything. Yeah, once they introduced him, I was like, this is dumb. I'm gonna stop paying attention. I feel like it really sounds like I hated the movie, but like it was
wait, why
okay.
didn't you like the love interest?
I don't know. I thought he was just so unnecessary. Like I don't know. It's just dumb, and I didn't like his final scene where he's like, "I'll see you around." Maybe I'm very cynical about love though. So like maybe whenever that plot point is introduced, I'm like, this is bad. Um, but like in general, once I stopped like tuning into the actual plot, because I was like, okay, now they saved China. I like did recognize like how cinematically pretty the film was. So like I think that's why I like didn't mind the Phoenix because it was really pretty. But I think you really need to like stop paying attention to the film to like the cinematic stuff.
Yeah, that's very fair. So we can talk up Mulan a little bit since we've kind of been ragging at it. I do agree. Like it's a pretty gorgeous movie. Like there's a lot of shots where she's just like traveling across the landscape and it looks like it might be like a Chinese tourism board ad or something. And you just see like rolling mountains in the background. And you just see like I don't know canyons, water, river, just a variety of vibrant colors that pop out of your screen. So there's like if there's one thing that Mulan has going for it, it's that kind of cinematography and those landscape shots. And like I think the visuals are pretty gorgeous. So there you go, Mulan. Um, I do think it gets a little bit neutered by the fact that it got released on like our screen though, like this little like maybe 4 foot TV screen that you're trying to watch it on when it's definitely meant to be watched on like a big screen, a cinema screen that actually like surrounds you with color and makes every shot pop. So sorry, that's pretty sad for the movie, I guess.
Another thing I liked, I don't know, maybe this is a bad take, but I kind of liked the fight choreos where like all like the flying and like the lighter than gravity like running and stuff. I thought that felt like pretty like traditionally wuxia to me, and like I don't know, it was just kind of cool seeing that. But I don't really watch very many like kung fu movies, so maybe it was like done in a bad way. I'm not sure.
I mean, I already mentioned, but I really like the Witch Lady. I don't know. I think that's also why I didn't like the dude character because like I thought the addition of the Witch Lady was more like female empowerment, kind of to the point where maybe in the cartoon they couldn't have done that because that was like the 90s or something. So that was like my interpretation. I was like, oh, this is like showing like I don't know like female empowerment and stuff. So like, why do they need to add romantic interest? Like that's dumb. And I think that like I personally thought it like deterred away from like what the film was going for the Witch Lady, but maybe she was just a villain. It didn't have a deeper meaning. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the Witch Lady was definitely not meant to be a villain. Like she was a tragic villain. Like she sacrificed herself for Mulan. But that was like such a waste of her character. I feel like the scene where the scenes where she gets to talk to Mulan like one on one and expresses her backstory and her fears and how she's been ostracized from society for being a woman, like and asks Mulan to join her, like yeah, Mulan should just like join her and take down the regime. But instead the witch lady just dies and Mulan like bends the knee to the emperor and she goes back to be like a member of the Empress Imperial Guard where she continues to guard the patriarchal regime. And so it just feels like very counterintuitive, like you're baiting us with this female empowerment and then just gets thrown away in my opinion.
Okay, yeah, I really wish she hadn't died. Like, I wish they just teamed up together and, like, I don't know, fled China.
Yeah, but that's like not Disney enough, so she dies. We need the black and white fairy tale. Um, but yeah, I'm gonna bring it back a little bit to what Andrew said. I definitely like the fight choreo too. Like we watched Hero yesterday, which is like a 2004 movie, you know, another wuxia classic, and I feel like it might look a little bit weird to like non-Chinese people who know what wuxia is to see people flying around, but I think it's pretty cool. I think it's like pretty elegant movement. It kind of gives you a lot of possibilities when it comes to fight scenes, and I'm a pretty big fan of like how they chose to do that.
I've heard a lot of criticism of like Western movie action superhero fight scenes too, just because I think I watched like a side by side comparison of like different fight choreos on YouTube like a few years ago. I don't remember exactly the details, excuse me, but
Andrew's a
um,
whole film critic.
I guess so. No, but it was just kind of like comparing and contrasting the different like cinematography styles of fighting, and like in like wuxia movies, you'll get like full body views because like your actors really are martial artists, right? And there's like some beauty in their movements, and just like everything is like much more artistic, I guess, and like it feels almost like a dance. But then in like superhero movies, like everything's moving so fast and all the shots are cut off early, and like you can't really tell what's going on, just because everything's so like zoomed in and stuff. I don't know.
See, one thing on the like whole wuxia thing that I didn't like that much though was like how they randomly introduced this idea of chi. Like I like it was so poorly done. Kung Fu Panda 3 definitely did it better. Like if you like they just like make her innately good at chi for some reason. So she's just like this prodigal fighter who can just go toe to toe with like best fighters and come out on top just because she's gifted by virtue of birth. And I'm not a fan of that. Like, I feel like there's got to be at least some level of either character development when it comes to combat or something like that. Like, it just kind of breaks the realism for her to just like fight so well just for free. And I feel like it looks cool, but I'm not a fan. Like maybe if they like incorporate it into the training sequence, maybe even then I would have been okay with it. Like her learning to use her chi, but she just like gets to use it for free for no reason. That just kind of rubs me the wrong way. I don't know. I don't know if y'all feel that.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I also like interpreted it like I think it was like I don't know, anti-feminist in a way almost because like in the original movie it was like she worked really hard and she built up her confidence and she was able to like climb the wood tower or whatever and get the arrow thing that was at the top. But like now it's like, oh, she has a magical power and that's the only way she can like keep up in the Chinese army.
Yeah, and like the original one, like she doesn't actually really like. I don't remember. I haven't seen it in a while, but I don't think she like ever just like goes to town on anyone in one-on-one combat. Like she doesn't just like dance around them in like a whirlwind of steel and just kill someone like that. Most of the time that she actually like succeeds in combat is just through like trickery, like the avalanche, or at the end when she kills the Hun dude. It's like with a firework. You know, it's like a lot of more playful and fun payoffs, especially the way like her climbing up the wooden pole to get the arrow like pays off at the end when they climb up the pillars with their like sashes. Like it feels like more tightly written, and it feels like there was actually a payoff to her training and the first part of the story instead of it just all being given to her. And I don't know. I just want to see a little bit more character development there. IMO.
And the other thing is like in the live action they like tried to make her like awkward or something like at the very beginning, but then she was like she just stopped being awkward when like she got chi or whatever. But in the cartoon, like she was pretty awkward throughout. Like the only reason she was able to save the avalanche, like she almost like fell over before she like saved everyone from the Huns or whatever. And I think that like I don't know, I like elevated like the live action almost elevated her to like the status of like some sort of like god or goddess or whatever, and that was strange.
Yeah, I feel like if they wanted to like incorporate wuxia, either give us like a quick training sequence or just like make some like most people can do it, and so then everyone's dancing around. You know, that's pretty cool. But like the way it is just rubs me a little bit the wrong way. What else? What do you think about the acting? Just the delivery, emotions, expressions. we got a pretty ensemble cast here.
I don't know. I didn't think there was much to act. Almost like I felt like it was mostly battle landscape. Maybe there was some acting at the beginning. I don't know. I still think the witch lady had the best scenes, like by far. And then, like I don't know. I don't remember anyone else's acting, which is bad. So it probably means it wasn't
That's probably
memorable.
just means the acting was bad though. You're right though. Like there wasn't a ton of acting. Like I feel like what was it like Zuma? I don't know. Is that how it's pronounced his name? Mulan's dad like tries to do some like emotions like at the beginning, but it just felt like off to me. I wasn't a huge fan of the acting either. Really like what makes the movie like sufficiently entertaining is just like the visuals and the fight scenes to me. Everything else is just like Well, there's my verdict. Everyone thought it was just like mediocre and sufficiently interesting. We also didn't really like reach a conclusion on the whole controversy because I think it's not a black and white issue. The controversy behind the movie, so hopefully we at least provided a little bit more perspective. But
You have a bullet here saying comparison to the original Mulan. I want to say I'm pretty sure. I mean I did like the original Mulan better. And just like a quick one more like topic. I don't know if it's a topic, but I want to say something. I think if something like the original Mulan came out today, it would get a lot of backlash for a lot of the things it did do to the original story. But I feel like I don't know if it excuses it coming out like 20 years ago, but like I feel like the original Mulan is something that we've like all grown up with, and it's become, I guess, I feel like a part of Chinese culture or Chinese American culture, and or even like Asian American culture. There we are. But so even though it's got like singing and it's not super true to the source material, and it's got like Mushu and like I don't know, just like it's just I feel like to me it's just like again it's like one of those classic movies. Just growing up with it, I guess. Where am I going here? I feel like it has become like a part of Chinese American culture, and I think I'm really not sure where I'm going with
no,
this.
I agree. Like this, the new Mulan does not like find its place in Chinese American culture in the same way that the old Mulan does. Like the new Mulan just feels like yet another Disney remake that they're doing to try to make money. The old Mulan kind of feels like a classic. I guess since you brought up the topic and the comparison, I'll also say that like I feel like the new Mulan lost a lot of soul that the old one had. Like the new one just feels like a CGI like cinematic plot war movie. Like it's pretty much a war movie, honestly, based on how they try to like portray it. They take away Mushu, sucks out a lot of like inherently going from animation to live action. You lose a lot of the whimsy that's associated with the exaggerated expressions of animation. And then they continue to like take out a lot of the humorous points like Mushu, and so it just leaves it as like a serious movie. But I don't think that's what they should have gone for. Like I really liked the original whimsy of the original Mulan, and I think that's what made it a classic. Not like trying to be serious, not like trying to take war seriously, but fail because you're ultimately a Disney movie. But yeah, I agree. I think the original was way better. Abby, any thoughts? If not, I'll wrap it up.
Yeah, I also think the original was way better. And then like I know like other than like how important it is in like Asian American and Chinese American like communities, like for a lot of the LGBTQ community, like Shang is kind of like a bisexual icon. And it was kind of sad that they just like got rid of that in the live action remake. Like I understand that that's probably controversial in China, but I know that that was like important for a lot of people. So that was just like I don't know, crappy. Yeah, other than that, I don't have any more thoughts. So
All right, let's get your numbers. Out of 5 stars, what would y'all give Mulan? Abby, you first.
I don't know, like I want to be nice and give it like a 3, but then I'm like, well, I would honestly rather just like nap for those 2 hours. I like napping's great, but then I feel like I should like demote it to like a 2, maybe like a 2.25. You know, it has to be like 2.25 because like 2.5 like that's rounded up to a 3, but like I want to make it like very much known that it's not worthy of being even rounded to a 3 star. Like it needs to be only slightly better than like what 40%.
I feel like my rating scheme is going to be kind of off. I don't watch a lot of movies, and honestly, like if like sometimes I just like spend like not quite 2 hours, but like feels close to it. Literally just like doing nothing. I'm gonna give it a 3, just because it was something to do other than nothing, I guess. But like there were points where I was like, I'm enjoying this, so I'll give it a 3.
Vibe. I give it a 3 as well, just because I give 3 to I pretty much give all the movies I consider mediocre a 3, and it was like sufficiently entertaining with its like fight scenes and its visuals and stuff that I didn't hate it, so it gets a 3. So 2.25, 3 and 3 from the Casa Dim Sum Lusum podcast movie review crew. That is our last topic. I think we are actually drawing to an end now. Hit us with the outro.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in to our 4th episode, second official one of Casas Dim Sum Lusum. You can find us on most major podcasting platforms such as Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Please give us 5 stars if you're able to rate us on Apple. We really appreciate it. And share this podcast with your friends because we get a cent for every listen. Bye.